Thank you for attending this meeting. In, in today's lecture, the topic will be mergers and acquisitions. So let me share the screen. So again, we want to discuss mergers and acquisitions today. So really, mergers and acquisitions are two topics. They're very much related, but they're two separate topics. So what is the difference between a merger and an acquisition? So in a merger, you have two companies. You have A and B, companies A and B, and they're going to merge to create company AB. In an acquisition, you have companies A and B. Company A will acquire company B. So in the end, there's only company A. So I'm not sure if this is a correct analysis, but I'm just doing this because the names work. But before, there were two companies, there were two big aircraft companies, McDonnell Company and Douglas Aircraft. And they were both big aerospace companies. And just based off the name, I think they merged to create McDonnell Douglas. So some of the McDonnell Douglas planes are still flying today. Very good company, all right? And state of the art passenger aircraft. Now what happened after some time? Boeing decided that they wanted to purchase McDonnell Douglas. So this was an acquisition. So Boeing is A, McDonnell Douglas is B. When Boeing acquired McDonnell Douglas, in the end, all that was left was Boeing. McDonnell Douglas was no more. Became part of Boeing. So you see in the first one with the green dots, you had McDonnell Company, Douglas Aircraft. They merged to create McDonnell Douglas. With the purple dots at the bottom, you have Boeing acquiring McDonnell Douglas, and in the end, we were left with Boeing, and McDonnell Douglas was no more. So that was the difference. That's the difference then between a merger and an acquisition. So here are some other graphics to show the difference between mergers and acquisitions. So in a merger, you have old company A plus old company B, and they're going to merge to create a new company. In an acquisition, you have old company A plus old company B, and after the acquisition, you'll have either old company A or old company B. So in the acquisition, either old company A purchased old company B or vice versa. But one company will be gone. In a merger, basically they're both gone and they merge to create a new company. So here's another graphic there, and it begins with an acquisition. So you have the big fish, it eats the little fish, and it becomes a bigger fish. In an acquisition, you have the green dots. In a merger, on below, you have the green dots, and they'll merge to create one bigger dot. So that's a merger. So let's go over then the technical definitions of mergers and acquisitions. A merger refers to consolidation of two or more companies to form an all-new entity with a new name. Merger assists the companies in uniting their strengths, resources, and weaknesses. Mergers lead to a reduction in trade barrier and competition. So we'll talk about the different types of mergers: horizontal, vertical, congeneric, or I'll call that a concentric merger, a reverse merger, and a conglomerate merger. Versus an acquisition. So in an acquisition, acquisition is the purchase of an entity by another entity. This can be done by either acquiring ownership over 51% of its share capital, or by taking over the assets of the company. The acquiring company is more influential in terms of structure, operation, and size compared to the target company. So what are some types of acquisitions? Hostile, friendly, buyout. Now, what's important to understand in an acquisition is that the company who's the purchaser does not have to buy all the stock of the company being purchased. The purchaser only has to buy 51% of the common stock of the other company, the company being purchased, to have controlling interest. So they don't have to buy 100% of the stock of the company being purchased, just 51%. Very simple majority to have control over the other company. Now, in an acquisition, you can have these different types of acquisitions. You see it at the bottom there. So let me start with the middle. And what is a friendly acquisition? When the purchaser and the company being purchased agree to that acquisition. Buyout, the one at the bottom there, I'm not sure what the difference is between a friendly and a buyout. In a hostile takeover, on the other hand, at the very top, the purchaser is trying to buy the company being purchased, and the company being purchased does not want to be purchased by the purchaser. The company being purchased is unfriendly towards the purchaser. So this could happen a lot. So a lot of times what companies do is that they put what are called poison pills within the company to make them unattractive as a hostile takeover. You've heard that term. Poison pills make it difficult for the purchaser to do a hostile takeover of another company. And so here I have some examples, some recent examples of mergers and acquisitions. And I'm not sure if which ones are mergers and which ones are acquisitions, but these are some famous ones. So we know there was a merger or acquisition between Whole Foods Market and Amazon. We know that there was a merger or acquisition between Aetna, the big insurance company, and CVS Health. As of 2001, I'm sorry, 2021, the Amazon, Whole Foods, and the Aetna CV, they may have been done within 5 years of 2021. Hershey's, Skinny Pop Popcorn, I hadn't heard of that one before. So I can't tell you if that was a merger or acquisition when it occurred. And the one at the bottom right, Coach and Kate Spade, New York, have no idea when that occurred, if that was a merger and acquisition. I think Coach produces ladies' purses, but I'm not sure. I'm not sure. Don't hold me to that. I could be very wrong on that. Very wrong. And Kate Spade of New York, I have no idea what that is. So Coach, I might have an idea of what that is. And Kate Spade of New York, I have no idea. If Coach is the company that I'm thinking about, then they sell very high-end purses. And I think the target audience are women's, but I'm not sure. I'm not sure. Okay. But Whole Foods and Amazon, Aetna, and CVS, I have a better feel for. What are the reasons? What are some reasons for a merger and acquisition? Working from the top left there and down, financial synergy for lower cost of capital. So they want to merge or require to reduce the weighted average cost of capital. Remember, projects must return at least the weighted average cost of capital for the company to accept that project. If the weighted average cost of capital is lowered, then there are potentially many more projects available to the company. Number two, improving the company's performance and accelerating its growth. From the Gordon growth model, we know the value of growth in determining the stock price. So number two, if that's done correctly, that should increase the stock price. Number three, advantages from economies of scale. In economies of scale, the bigger you are, the more economic efficiencies you may be able to derive. The more economic efficiencies, business efficiencies, engineering efficiencies. Step four, diversification for higher growth products or markets. Step five, to increase market share and positioning, giving broader market access. So in the case of Boeing and McDonnell Douglas, they were the two main passenger aircraft manufacturers in the US. And the other big passenger aircraft manufacturer in Europe is called Airbus. So by Boeing acquiring McDonnell Douglas, they got a bigger market share and were better able to take on Airbus. Airbus is a conglomeration of a lot of different European aircraft manufacturers. So it gave Boeing a better chance against Airbus. That goes into step six, strategic realignment and technical change. Step seven, tax considerations. Okay, so there are a myriad of tax considerations, and I won't go into that too much. We cover that in detail in our advanced accounting course here. Number eight, you have an undervalued target. So we know what you're going to do if a company is undervalued. You buy it because the value should go up. And step 9, finally, the diversification of risk. And the diversification of risk applies to your degree of operating leverage, your degree of financial leverage, and your degree of combined leverage. So you can see here why mergers and acquisitions is the last topic in this course, because it just consolidates so many previous topics that were brought up in this course. And we treated those topics individually, but now we see that they are all consolidated together into this one topic. Okay, so all the topics that we learned before were important in and of themselves. But when you get to more complex analysis, like we see here, you have to be able to combine those to make the best fiduciary decision. Again, here are some other reasons for mergers and acquisitions. Starting at the top and working clockwise, increase market share, break into or buy their way into a promising market, promote growth, acquire valuable assets, achieve vertical integration, and leverage synergies to create even more value. So the leverage then, again, goes back to the degree of operating leverage, the degree of financial leverage, and most importantly, the degree of combined leverage. Here are some other goals here. So again, let's start at the top, work clockwise. Future goals, mutual benefits, maximizing profits, expansion of the business, economies of scale, increase market share. I think this next slide is wrong. That should read cost minimization. You never want to maximize your costs. That should read cost minimization. Diversification of risk, goodwill, product improvement. So those are other reasons to perform mergers and acquisitions. In general, there are 4 types of mergers and acquisitions. So what is a horizontal mergers and acquisition? I'll say M&A a lot. What is a horizontal M&A? Where 2 similar companies merge. So this might not be the best example, but this is if Ford and GM merge. If Ford and GM merge, okay, they both produce very similar products. So merging will go out there and be merging between Ford and GM would be a horizontal merger versus a vertical merger. So many times in a vertical merger, you're going to merge with your suppliers. So that would be if Goodyear, the tire company, was acquired or merged with Ford. Why would Ford do something like that? Because they want the tire company to integrate with Ford. Now I'm just making up these examples, but you get the point. In a conglomerate merger, you have these big companies that do many things, and they're merging together. So for example, when we look at Ford and GM, they're both basically car manufacturers. But with conglomerate mergers, you have these big companies like General Electric. They do all type of things, okay? And another company that I could think offhand that does a lot of things is Honeywell. The big, and they're really into electronics. But for example, if General Electric and Honeywell, both of those are big engineering firms, but they do a lot of different type of engineering. And merging them would be a conglomerate merger. The next one would be a concentric merger. And in a concentric merger, basically two dissimilar companies are merging. So here comes a lousy example, but if Boeing merged with Burger King, okay, Boeing is the big aerospace company. Burger King makes hamburgers. They may merge. And they're dissimilar. That's what a concentric merger is. All right. And there's probably a good reason for it, but it's generally not obvious what that is to the layperson. And they may not have a mutual agreement after they merge. It was just a good opportunity. Okay, so make this a little bit smaller. And again, we have the four type, the conglomerate, horizontal, vertical, and extension or concentric. And I think earlier this was also called a cogeneric merger. But extension, concentric, cogeneric mean kind of the same thing. You're merging into dissimilar areas. That's what we mean by a concentric or extension merger. Okay, so we have this kind of fuzzy graph here. Again, horizontal, vertical, conglomerate, and concentric. And you can go there, you can read this, and you could see there are different definitions of what a horizontal, vertical, conglomerate, and concentric merger and acquisition is. Now, we have an understanding of what mergers and acquisitions are. So now we want to go through the process of mergers and acquisitions. As you might imagine, for something that is this complicated, it's not a boilerplate. It's not a checklist. It's very, very complex. And so we're just going to give you during this lecture the big general processes. But to say that it's done the same way every single time is untrue. Everyone is unique. But they all follow these general processes. So working from number one and in the clockwise manner, step one is to develop your M&A strategy. Step two, identify the targets that you're going to merge with or acquire. Step three, information exchange between the two companies of the M&A. Step four, valuation and synergies. Valuation, here's another topic that we covered earlier. What are you going to use for valuation? What are the two main tools? Net present value and internal rate of return. So you can see that our class is really coming together now. But in step 4, valuation, internal rate of return, it can also be the stock valuations, Gordon growth model, the multiples model. That can be used for valuation also. Step 5, make an offer and negotiate. Step 6, do your due diligence to make sure that this is a financially and fiduciary feasible merger and acquisition. Step 7, do your purchase agreement. You may have covered this in tremendous detail in your business law class. And finally, you're going to have your deal closure and integration. Here's another set of general rules that you need to follow for mergers and acquisitions, a little bit more detailed. Starting at the bottom left and walking up the stairs, the acquisition strategy, your M&A search criteria. What are you searching for? What do you want? Instead of looking at everything, it's better to determine what you really want, then search from there. Step 3, target screening. Step 4, acquisition planning. How are you going to go out there and purchase that company? Is it just going to be switching common stock between the companies? Do you have enough cash to go out there and buy the other company? Or will you have to borrow money, usually issuing bonds, to go out there and purchase the company? That's what's called an LBO, or a leverage buyout. You're going to issue bonds, take the money from the bond issuance, and make the purchase. So we know how to value bonds now also in this class. So we know how to value bonds. Step 5, valuation analysis, net present value, internal rate of return, Gordon growth model, multiples model. Step 6, negotiations. Step 7, do your due diligence, do your homework. Step 8, purchase and sales contracts. Here's where business law comes into effect. Step 9, financing strategy for acquisition. And step 10, closing and integration. So you could see this stair step is a little more complex than the previous, but same general ideas that we need to follow. Here's another slide that gives you the general ideas for mergers and acquisitions. So starting at the top, analysis and commitment. You're going to have a leadership planning to make sure that the leaders are on board. You perform your due diligence. You do the planning, and you're going to close the M&A, mergers and acquisition. You're going to have a leadership implementation summit, integrating the two companies. You're going to have a leadership operating summit to make sure that all your leaders are on board on how we're going to operate the combined company. And finally, you want to align and optimize your M&A, your new company. Okay. Now, here we have your typical mergers and acquisition processes. All right. But what do I like particularly about this graph? It gives you an idea of the time that's involved with the mergers and acquisitions. Now, like anything else, this is just a general guideline. But these M&As take time. You can see from about a half year to a year, a half year to a year. All right. And then if you look at the blue boxes, you have 5 to 100. What are 5 to 100? Those are the companies that about 50, I'm sorry, that should be 50 to 100. About 50 to 100 companies you're thinking to merge with or acquire. Then you pare it down to about 15 to 25. You have discussions with those targets and see how open they are to an M&A. Then, going down even further, you have the term sheets. You have about 3 to 5 companies. And finally, on your due diligence, you've identified the one company that you want to purchase. And therefore, you're not going to do due diligence for 3 to 5. It's hard enough to do due diligence for just one company. Okay, for 3 to 5, it would be way too much. You perform your due diligence, and then you close out the M&A process. It usually takes 6 months to a year, even longer, to perform the mergers and acquisitions. What are three keys to a mergers and acquisitions success? Number one, adoption. Bring everyone in the acquired company on board quickly. Make sure that the company you are acquiring, you're going to open your communications to them very quickly. Step two, integration. The ability to integrate seamlessly with multiple ERPs, okay? And that's enterprise resource planning. So you may have 2 different systems for the companies. You have to make sure that they can integrate. Visibility, number 3, find savings, discover efficiencies, realize value. Okay, so find savings, discover efficiencies, realize values. So once the M&A has been complete for the company being acquired, a target company, the acquired company, and target company, how do you be a good leader? Show adaptability, build relationships, provide direction, motivate others, develop others, focus on customers, influence others, and most importantly, as a leader for the new company, you act with integrity. Treat both your old employees and the new employees as equals. Treat them as equals. And for both of them, act with integrity with both sides. All right, so let's bring in some other business combinations. So we know what a merger is. We know what an acquisition is. But what is a joint venture? You've heard of that term before. What is a joint venture? A joint venture is when two companies will work together on a single product. When two companies will work together on a single product. Okay, I'll give you an example in a second. Versus an alliance. So alliance is when you have two companies who are competitors, but they're going to go out there and work together, and not just for a single product or single project like a joint venture, but for a long-term relationship. So for example, for the Japanese automobile companies, American automobile companies, you just don't hear about them working together. But for the Japanese automobile companies, for example, Mazda and Toyota work together to build a version of the Toyota Corolla. I think Mazda makes the Mazda 3 and also a Toyota Corolla. They're basically the same thing. Toyota and Mazda are separate, and they're selling a Corolla and Mazda 3, which are direct competitors to each other. But they have this alliance because there are economies of scale to make that small 4-door sedan. Now, what is an example of a joint venture? So here I have one, and I'm not sure if you've ever heard of this before, but this is called the V-22 Osprey. And the V-22 Osprey is a joint venture between Boeing and Bell Helicopter. So Boeing is obviously a famous aerospace company. Bell Helicopter is another famous helicopter manufacturer. For helicopter manufacturers in the US, two very famous helicopter manufacturers are Bell Helicopters and Sikorsky. So what is the joint venture between Boeing and Bell Helicopter? And it's this V-22. So you could see on the left there, you see the V-22. It can land and take off vertically. It can go straight up and down, just like a helicopter. Then what will happen is that you can see where the propellers are. Those are called the nacelles. The nacelles will rotate 90 degrees forward. And now the V-22 becomes an airplane. So when the V-22 is taking off and landing, you're basically dealing with a helicopter. But once the V-22 is in the air, the V-22 becomes an airplane. The V-22 has advantages of both a helicopter and an airplane. And so Boeing and Bell Helicopters formed a joint venture to merge their expertise and their technologies. So a joint venture is not a merger and it's not an acquisition, but it is a business combination. So that's why we're bringing it into context with the mergers and acquisitions lecture. Okay, and the final topic here when we talk about mergers and acquisitions is a reverse merger. Okay, so a reverse merger is not a divestiture. It's not taking company A and breaking it into A and B. That's a divestiture. What is a reverse merger? You have a private company, a company that doesn't have stock. What does the private company do? The private company purchases a company that is a publicly traded company. It is a company that has stock. Why does the private company do this? Because they want to become a public company with stock without going through the long hassle of applying to the Securities and Exchange Commission to become a public company. Okay, they're trying to take a shortcut. The private company is trying to take a shortcut to become a public company. So a reverse merger is a merger in which a private company becomes a public company by acquiring a public company. Reverse mergers saves a private company from the complicated process and expensive compliance of becoming a public company. And all the complications and expenses are due to dealing with the Securities and Exchange Commission. What are some of the advantages of a reverse merger? The private company becomes a public company at a lesser cost and gets listed on the exchange without an IPO or an initial public offering. And you understand that, an initial public offering, from the chapter on common stock. Reverse mergers helps in savings of taxes of private companies. Now, what are some of the disadvantages? Lawsuits for various reasons are very common during the reverse merger. Many times the reverse mergers are more of a hostile type of situations, and that's where the lawsuits come into play. Reverse mergers lead to reverse stock splits. This further leads to a reduction in the number of shares held by the shareholders. We know that in a stock split, one stock becomes two stocks. In a reverse split, two stocks become one stock. In a reverse split, two stocks become one stock. Okay, and that's going to then decrease the number of shares outstanding. So that concludes this lecture on mergers and acquisitions. There's a lot to this topic, but unfortunately, we can only give you a broad overview of this fascinating process, very fascinating process. Okay, and it's something where there could be a very bright future in this, especially as companies do M&As, not within their own country, but become global mergers and acquisitions. Thank you very much. I appreciate your attention. Please contact me if you have any questions. Thank you again.